Segment 5, our final segment, Gary. What is to be done? Growth still sluggish, housing prices in many markets still sinking. Here in California, as many as a fifth of homeowners are underwater on their mortgages. Unemployment still at more than 9%. And a similar situation obtains in much of Europe. Let me give you 2 policy prescriptions, and you choose. How's that?
Okay. Yeah.
The British government, the new British government, intends to eliminate its structural deficit of more than 11% of GDP in just 5 years. Government departments will see their budgets cut by an average of almost 20%. 500,000 government workers will lose their jobs. That's 1. Here's 2. Let me just quote him to you. Economist Paul Krugman, writing in the New York Times just a couple of days ago, quote, "Economies that have experienced a severe financial crisis generally do not heal quickly. America needed a much stronger stimulus program than it got. Maybe voters will have a second thoughts about handing power back to the Republicans who got us into this mess and give Mr. Obama a second chance to turn the economy around." So on the one hand, a model of austerity, cut. On the other hand, Paul Krugman saying, we didn't spend enough. We need more stimulus and we need it fast. What does Gary Becker say?
Well, I already said I didn't think the stimulus package worked, so I don't see that the second stimulus is going to work anymore. So no, I don't support a second stimulus package. I didn't support the first one. In terms of the British approach, the cutback, I would try to, if I was in Great Britain, I think a strong case can be made for trying to cut back government spending, but not do it at the same time that you're raising taxes very heavily. So you try to get the economy growing a lot. I wouldn't directly worry so much about the fiscal situation, but I worry about what policies would increase the rate of growth of the economy. I think cutting back a lot of the government sectors would increase the rate of growth of the economy. I think cutting back some of the taxes, I'm not an expert on British tax structure, but cutting back some taxes would increase the rate of growth of the economy. I think if you can grow the economy faster, which will include some cutbacks in government spending, certainly slowing down the rate of growth of government spending. If you can grow the economy faster, that's the way you're going to get out of this financial and fiscal crisis. I think the British are more along the right direction than people who speak about a second stimulus.
And that's actually a very important point for the people who are going to be in charge soon. Cutting spending is not the end. It's a means, and you may want to proceed at a different pace from what you have in mind, because the end is growth.
Absolutely.
That's correct. Now, the Paul Krugman, here's why one reason I tossed him at you is because he holds a Nobel Prize. There are laymen, I'm a layman here, and I say to myself, now wait a moment. We had Reagan enact what, let's call it broadly speaking, the Friedman program or the Chicago School program of limited government and tax cuts. We have 25 years of growth. And now, Paul Krugman, Robert Reich, Larry Summers, it's as if Milton Friedman had never been born and John Maynard Keynes had never died. And how is a layman to understand what is taking place in your profession?
Not easy. Not easy, because Paul Krugman did some important work in economics, so his Nobel Prize certainly had merit. He did important work in international trade, not on stimulus packages and the like.
He's an economist of serious standing.
Yeah, he was a serious economist. He was. He's not doing serious work anymore, but he was a very serious and good economist. Larry Summers is an excellent economist. I know him very well. Robert Reich, no, he wasn't really an economist. I don't think his training is in economics. Yeah, I don't think his training is in economics. I think it's hard for any population when economists don't agree on issues. I think it's very difficult to.
And here it's not a disagreement of emphasis; it's a disagreement about fundamentals.
Yeah, I don't know what Larry Summers would say if he was not in the government and so on. Krugman is not in the government, so he's saying what he believes. I think what I trust with the American people is they've always had a lot of common sense. And yes, they can't follow all the technical arguments from economists. They can give it a common sense, touch. Is this consistent with my experience? What have I gotten out of this stimulus package? They said they're going to reduce unemployment by almost 2 percentage points. We're only down by like a half a percentage point from the peak unemployment, which is really very disappointing. So I think if you trust your common sense, you can't fully understand the arguments, and there's differences, and these arguments aren't 100% settled. But you can say what looks like a more sensible policy, that we trust the private sector to get us out of this and to grow us faster, or we trust government to grow us faster. And I think most Americans believe, and I think they're correct in that belief, that the private sector has shown that it performs better overall, not 100%, but better overall, despite the mistakes of investment banking, performs a lot better overall than the public sector does. And that's why country after country in the world, like China and Brazil and even Russia and India for sure, have been pushing their economies more toward the private sector, not against the private sector, because they've learned that experience.
Gary, let me close with a story. You knew Milton Friedman very well. I was privileged to be an acquaintance. Let me tell you about a dinner I had with Milton just 18 months or so before he died. I had read Bill Buckley's book, God and Man at Yale, which had been published 50 years earlier. And Buckley placed the locus of the statist impulse at Yale half a century ago in the Department of Economics. And what I had discovered at Dartmouth, my alma mater, here at Stanford, that first-rate economics departments cannot be first-rate economics departments without a heavy emphasis on free market economics. So I congratulated Milton Friedman, far be it from me, but I congratulated him on having lived to see a major victory. And Milton would not have any of it. He said, we may have won an intellectual victory, but there's no evidence that there's been a victory in practical politics at all. The government continues to grow and grow and grow. Now, he was speaking at a time when Republicans controlled both Congress and the presidency. How are you as grim as, in your view, as that?
No.
That there's such a disjunction between, you're not, all right.
Because I think,
cheer me up.
I think if you look at a global perspective, let's start out looking at a global perspective. There's no question the world, if you look at the last 30 years or so, has moved strongly in the free market direction. I think China started its reform in 1978. There were no private sector. Now private sector is more than half of the employment in the Chinese economy. State sector is still important and there are lots of problems, but it's more
they've
than
gone
half.
from 0 to more than 50%.
India started reforms in 1991 when the private sector was thwarted at every point by restriction of what they could do. Now the most robust part of the Indian economy is the private sector. You can get investments and so on going on. Brazil, even under Lula, who comes out of a trade union kind of socialist background, continued to promote more or less the private sector. Even Russia certainly went away from communism and so on. So you look at the world as a whole, I would say Milton Friedman should have been felt. His ideas, or the free market ideas, and more generally, have been extremely successful.
Now, you have grandchildren. 50 years from now, will they live in what you and Milton would still have recognized as a fundamentally free country?
Well, economists are notoriously poor at predicting 50 years from now. I believe they will. Barring nuclear and all that, all these problems, I believe they will. As I say, I have a lot of confidence in the American people. I think they have basic common sense. And I think common sense, I used to say economics is common sense, sort of made more systematic and more formal. I have a confidence in their common sense. I don't think they're going to deviate to any significant degree or consistently against an economy that's basically organized by private sector. And if we continue to do that, our grandchildren will be a lot better off than we are economically and health-wise and the like, and it will be basically a free economy.
Dr. Gary Becker, thank you. I'm Peter Robinson for Uncommon Knowledge and the Hoover Institution. Thanks for joining us.